Namaskar, a warm welcome to World News, an Indian perspective on All India Radio. This is Renu Kataria and with me is Anita Anand bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Russian President Vladimir Putin puts Russia's nuclear forces on high alert. Ukrainian and Russian delegations are set to meet on Belarus border for talks. Ukrainian forces says they repelled a Russian assault on country's second city of Kharkiv. UN Security Council to meet tonight over Russia-Ukraine conflict. Indian Embassy in Ukraine advises its citizens to use nearby railway stations to reach western regions. External Affairs Ministry of India calls on ambassadors of Russia and Ukraine separately conveyed deep concerns on security of Indian citizens in Ukraine. And in cricket, India wins by 6 wickets against Sri Lanka in the third and final T20 International at Dharamshala. With the new Omicron variant of coronavirus causing concern, we appeal to our listeners to be vigilant and to get fully vaccinated and help others, including children between 15 and 18 years, to get vaccinated. Please continue to follow these 3 simple steps to stay safe. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing, focus on hand and face hygiene. For any COVID-related information and guidance, contact national helpline numbers 011-2397-8046 and 1075. And now the news in detail. Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered the Russian military to put its nuclear forces on special alert, the highest level of alert for strategic missile forces. Speaking to top military officials, including Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, he said Western nations had taken unfriendly actions towards Russia and imposed illegitimate sanctions. Mr. Putin had already issued a coded warning that he was willing to use nuclear weapons as he began his invasion of Ukraine. Reacting over Russia's move, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, has called the move unacceptable. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has released a statement following his conversation with Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko today. President Zelensky said Kiev will send a delegation for talks without preconditions with Moscow at the Ukraine-Belarus border. Mr. Zelensky had earlier said he would not meet a Russian delegation on Belarusian territory because Russia's invasion was launched in part from Belarus. Ukrainian forces have said that they have repelled an attack on the country's second city, Kharkiv, after fierce clashes with Russian forces. Regional Governor Oleh Shineubov in a statement said the city was now rid of Russian troops after street-to-street fighting overnight. Meanwhile, Ukrainians' emergency services said a 9-story residential tower was hit in Russian strike. According to a Ukrainian state communications agency, earlier Russian troops blew up a natural gas pipeline nearby. According to the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, the fighting across Ukraine has resulted in at least 240 civilian casualties, including 64 deaths. It added that damage to homes and critical infrastructure has left hundreds of people without access to water and electricity.
Amid the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, the United Nations Security Council will convene today to vote on a resolution calling for a special session of the General Assembly. The United States and Albania have requested a meeting of the UN Security Council for a procedural vote to appoint a special session of the General Assembly over the events in Ukraine. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is chairing a high-level meeting on the Ukraine issue tonight. The meeting is being attended by External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla, among others. India said that its citizens are being evacuated from Ukraine through Romania and Hungary. In its advisory, Indian Embassy in Ukraine said that it is continuously exploring and working to open up more borders with neighboring countries for Indian citizens. It said, as and when curfew is lifted and there is considerable movement of people in their respective neighborhoods, Indian nationals are advised to use nearby railway stations for movement out of regions of active conflict and proceed towards the western regions. The schedule of trains can be seen at the website www.uz.gov.ua, and people are also advised to check the digital boards at railway stations because they are the most updated and trustworthy.
A dedicated Twitter handle has been set up by the External Affairs Ministry to assist in the evacuation of Indians from Ukraine. MEA spokesperson Arindam Bagchi in a tweet said that people can direct all related queries to @OP-Ganga. The following 24/7 control centers have been set up to assist in the evacuation of Indian nationals through the border crossing points with Poland, Romania, Hungary and Slovak Republic. In Poland, can be contacted on +4822 54 0000, +4879 58 50877 and +4879 27 12511. Mail ID is controlroominwarsaw@gmail.com. In Romania, it can be contacted on +40 732 124 309 and +40 771 632 567. In Hungary, can be contacted on +36 30 85 17373 +36 13 25 7742 +36 13 25 7743, and WhatsApp number is +36 30 85 17373. And in Slovak Republic, can be contacted on +421 252 631377 and +421 2529 62916. External Affairs Ministry today called in both the ambassadors of Russia and Ukraine separately and conveyed deep concerns on safety and security of Indian citizens, particularly the students based in Ukraine. Addressing media in New Delhi, Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla said that he has shared with both the envoys the locations where the Indian citizens are concentrated for ensuring their protection. Mr. Shringla said that both the envoys took note of the concerns and assured him that they are very cognizant of the safety and security of the Indian citizens. Mr. Shringla also said that so far under Operation Ganga, thousands of Indian citizens have been flown out of Romania and Hungary, and another 1,000 have been evacuated from Ukraine through land routes, and flights have been organized for them.
In Kharkiv itself, originally there were some 4,000 students who were studying in that area. We also understand that at least half of them have moved westwards and are not there now. Those who are there obviously is a matter of high priority for us because that is a conflict area and they are safe areas. They're in shelters, they're in bunkers, they are as secure as they can be. Today I was told by the ambassadors I met that at least the Ukrainian ambassador told me that they had provided for food and water and other provisions and continue to do that to the extent that they can.
External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has called Foreign Minister of Moldova Nicu Popescu seeking support for facilitating entry of Indian nationals on the Ukraine-Moldova border. Dr. Jaishankar appreciated his ready response and strong support. He said MEA representatives will accordingly reach there tomorrow. In a tweet, the External Affairs Minister said that he has also called up Hungarian Foreign Minister M. Peter Szijjártó and requested further cooperation on the Hungary-Ukraine border. Poland's national football team will not face Russia in a crucial 2022 World Cup qualification playoff match in March to protest against the war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, the 2022 Union of European Football Associations Champions League final will be played in France after the tournament governing body moved the match away from Russia. Russia's Formula One Grand Prix has also been cancelled.
China and the US have again engaged in military maneuvering in the sensitive Taiwan Strait amid Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen's call for enhanced military vigilance in response to the Ukraine situation. A US-guided missile destroyer, USS Ralph Johnson, sailed through the Taiwan Strait on Saturday, which US Navy 7th Fleet said was a routine transit through international waters, but Chinese PLA Eastern Theater Command described as provocative. Taiwan's Defense Ministry said it observed nothing out of the ordinary. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh has said that all the Indians stranded in Ukraine will be brought back to the country at the government's expense. In a tweet, the defense minister said that the government has decided to increase the number of flights to neighboring countries of Ukraine with their permission for this purpose.
Union Minister of State for Information and Broadcasting, Dr. L. Murugan, has said that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has taken all the steps needed to bring back Indian students from Ukraine. Briefing the media after inaugurating the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav exhibition at Chennai today, he said that students are being brought back through the efforts of the Ministry of External Affairs. The US, European Union and United Kingdom have agreed to block selected Russian banks from the SWIFT global financial messaging system as part of a new round of sanctions aiming to impose a severe cost on Moscow. This system is used by Russia to move money around more than 11,000 banks and other financial institutions worldwide. They also agreed to impose restrictive measures on Russia's central bank. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, the bulk of Russian forces were 30 kilometers from the city's center, according to Britain and the US. It was unclear how much territory Russian forces had seized or to what extent their advance had been stalled. Britain's Ministry of Defense said that the speed of the Russian advance has temporarily slowed likely as a result of acute logistical difficulties and a strong Ukrainian resistance. While Russia claims its assault on Ukraine from the north, east and south is aimed only at military targets, Ukraine claimed bridges, schools and residential neighborhoods have been hit.
The fourth Operation Ganga flight with 198 Indian evacuees from Ukraine has reached Delhi from Romanian capital Bucharest. Earlier, the third flight of Operation Ganga with 240 Indian nationals from Budapest landed in Delhi today morning. A batch of Indian nationals in Ukraine reached Ukraine-Hungary border and then came to Budapest to board the flight. The Ukrainian airspace has been closed for civil aircraft operations and the Indian evacuation flights are operating out of the Romanian capital Bucharest and Hungarian capital Budapest. This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
Welcome back to World News. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on evacuation of Indian nationals from Ukraine gaining momentum. In conversation are Bhaswati Mukherjee, former ambassador, and Simran Sodhi, journalist.
Today we are discussing the situation in Ukraine and we are discussing the evacuation of the Indian nationals in Ukraine, which the Indian government has undertaken. And we see that 4 flights have already landed in India from Ukraine to a more schedule. And there are a couple of other flights which will be landing in the coming days. Ambassador Mukherjee, when you see the events taking place while we have a war situation in Ukraine, how would you rate the Indian government's response to the situation? Do you think it has been an efficient and a response that has been quick to take off from the ground? And as we see more flights coming in, it seems that the Indian government has stepped up to the challenge.
I think that the response of the Indian government demonstrates how committed the government is to bringing back all our nationals, most of them young students, back safely to India. We have a lot of experience in bringing back Indian nationals from conflict-ridden, war-torn areas in the past. The situation in this particular case is particularly complex, especially for our nationals who are studying or are based in Kiev, because Kiev today is completely surrounded by Russian forces. So the students, in order to get out, would have to go through 2 areas of defense. First, the Ukrainian circle, and then the Russian forces. And then we have worked out methods to transport them by bus, etc., to the nearest border. There are several neighboring countries where our ambassadors have set up arrangements, teams, liaison officers at the border to help them to cross, because it's also important to remember that they are not alone in trying to escape Ukraine. Ukrainian citizens in thousands are leaving Ukraine, particularly women and children. So there is a huge rush and traffic jam at these borders, particularly on the Polish border, which makes the task of the Government of India, of the External Affairs Ministry, and for our Foreign Service officers who are at these transit points, their task even more challenging. But we are not going to stop until every Indian national stranded in Ukraine is brought back safely by flights back to Delhi or Mumbai.
Ambassador Mukherjee, as you pointed out, the Indian government has made it its priority number one to evacuate the Indian nationals in Ukraine. We also saw that Prime Minister Modi has spoken to the presidents of Russia and Ukraine, and we have the External Affairs Minister also holding talks, and we see countries like Poland, for example, are now saying that we'll open our borders to Indian nationals. But as you pointed out that this is a warlike situation and Indians are not the only ones who are trying to flee Ukraine. How do you assess the situation on the ground, given the fact that, India has good ties with Russia and Ukraine, we have good ties with Poland, but at the same time, there is this emergency that you need to get your nationals out of Ukraine. How do you think the geopolitics of the entire situation is playing out?
Well, about an hour ago, our Foreign Secretary, Mr. Shringla, held a press conference where he explained that in addition to the conversation between our Prime Minister and President Zelensky today and yesterday with President Putin, he has met today the ambassadors of the Russian Federation and of Ukraine, and he confirmed also that the Ukrainian embassy here and the Ukrainian ambassador, despite their other pressing priorities, have been extremely cooperative and helpful in trying to get the necessary clearances from Ukrainian border guards to allow our nationals to cross over. This is particularly so in Poland, but there are other border crossings also, Moldova, etc. Ukraine has many neighboring countries, and we are trying to encourage our nationals to go to the nearest border by facilitating their transport through the conflict-ridden, war-torn areas by speaking to both the Ukrainian forces and the Russian forces. Both are cooperating with us. In cases where the situation is presently too dangerous, we have asked our nationals to stay put in their bunkers or in the safe areas that has been provided to them by the Ukrainian government or the Ukrainian civil authorities until we are in a position to assure their safe transportation to the Ukrainian border crossing with a neighboring country. So as you can imagine, it is hugely challenging because of also the large numbers involved. At present, almost, I would say, 21,000 nationals are stuck in Ukraine. So this is going to take a little bit of time before we can work it out, because the last thing that we would want is to have some friendly fire on an Indian convoy resulting in casualties. So we have to make sure that we get our nationals to the border safely. Once they cross the border, it's not a problem. We've got Russian-speaking officials on each border crossing. We've made arrangements for their transportation to the nearest airport, for hotel stay, food, etc. The challenge is to get them to the border and to cross the border. There again, as I said, Ukrainian authorities have been very cooperative and their border guards have been instructed to allow Indian nationals to cross over.
Ambassador Mukherjee, we've seen the Indian government and the Ministry of External Affairs step up for the evacuation of the Indian nationals in Ukraine. We've seen this in the last few years that whenever there's been a conflict situation in the world, we've seen how India has stepped up its evacuation processes. We've gotten our nationals back. We also look at other countries, and because the other countries are also trying to get their nationals out of Ukraine. And one is tempted to draw a bit of comparison and say that India has actually taken the lead and has done an excellent job when it comes to the evacuation of its nationals, not only what we are seeing in the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, but even in past situations. Do you feel that the priority of the Indian government in getting the Indian nationals out of Ukraine is also noteworthy and a praiseworthy effort which the Indian government is making, because we've also seen a lot of other nationals that are stuck in Ukraine, unable to get out, and the other governments have not been as effective or as fast to get the nationals out as India. So maybe for a change we can say that, our government and our people on the ground have really worked and gotten quick results for us.
I would agree with you with one small change. It's not for a change. Actually, India has vast expertise in bringing back nationals from war-torn areas. If you look at right from the time actually when the crisis broke out in Iraq, and we were much less experienced in those days, we were able to fly back on our nationals from an area which had been taken over by Saddam. If you remember, we got back our nationals from Kuwait, and in the recent past, we have used every method possible, including by sea, by air, or by land, to get our nationals back. In this particular conflict situation, it is extremely challenging because it's an ongoing military conflict with Ukrainian forces as an inner perimeter and Russian forces on an external perimeter, which is completely surrounded several cities, including Kiev. There, to negotiate and to maneuver and to navigate two lines of one defense, one offense, and then to bus or transport our nationals to the border is indeed a challenging situation. If the situation would improve, then we could perhaps be in a position to be able to fly them out directly from Ukraine. But at present, the airspace of Ukraine and some of the areas around which are close to the border are completely closed to air traffic. So we have to continue to press on. But I agree with you that we are proud indeed of the efforts which have been made by our government, by our Ministry of External Affairs, by our embassy, which incidentally is one of the embassies which is fully operational. 2 days before the conflict broke out, all the Western embassies pulled out. Most of the embassies pulled out. Our embassy personnel are there. They're working night and day. They are in Kiev. They are in dangerous situations, but they are working to serve India and Indian nationals. So I think today is the day that we can justly be proud of the manner in which our government has actually stepped up and responded to the challenge.
Pastor Mukherjee, if you look at the situation which is evolving in Ukraine, and we have the Russian troops there, and we are getting reports almost every hour how the situation is escalating, and we see the US and Europe putting more sanctions on Russia. If you were to look into the near future, how do you see this panning out? And also, how do you see India responding to this situation? Because India has good ties with Ukraine, with Russia, with Europe, with US. So for India, diplomatically, this becomes a difficult time. And also, as the situation pans out, what are India's choices or options as we go along?
Actually, India is uniquely situated to facilitate a return to diplomacy and a negotiated settlement. We have spoken to President Putin and to President Biden. President Zelensky himself called up today, following which our Prime Minister has appealed immediately for a cessation of violence and a return to the negotiating table. It's a question of time. There was yesterday a pause in the fighting when President Putin had a thought that there would be a time for talks. Unfortunately, it would appear that the West encouraged the Ukrainian president to hold on for some more time. Now there is once more talk of finding a capital. The Russians have suggested two names. The Ukrainians have suggested 4 other names. So I presume that this conflict will not continue for too long, and there would be some kind of return to talks. The only issue is that the talks, when they commence in whichever capital, would need to be conducted in good faith and through guarantees of security on both sides, which would enable a lasting settlement of the conflict. And India, with its excellent relations with the Russians, with the Americans, and keeping in mind how the Ukrainian president has reached out to us, if we are required, naturally, we would be more than happy to facilitate or help in any way possible if we are asked. And of course, as a non-permanent member of the Security Council at present, we have in our explanation of vote after the vote also explained our anguish at the violence and our desire for an immediate cessation and a return to talks so that this violence, this bloodshed can end and things can go back to normal as soon as possible.
And in the coming days, we will continue our discussions on the ongoing war-like situation in Ukraine, and we will also continue our discussions on the evacuation of the Indian nationals from Ukraine, which the Indian government is spearheading and doing an excellent job at doing. With this, we bring today's discussion to an end. Thank you.
Thank you.
In Pakistan, opposition leaders have slammed the Imran Khan government for poor economic conditions of the country. PMLN President and leader of the opposition Nawaz Sharif on Friday said that the government, National Accountability Bureau NAB Niazi Nexus, has deteriorated the economic situation of the country. Mr. Sharif talked about the corruption of the incumbent government and said that the nation will hold the government accountable for the looted money.
In Pakistan, the Prevention of Electronic Crime Act (PECA) is facing big criticism from all quarters. The Chief Justice of Islamabad High Court has called it a draconian act. Now PPP chairperson Bilawal Bhutto Zardari has said they will challenge the Prevention of Electronic Crime Act (PECA) ordinance in court. The PPP chairman assured commitment to freedom of the press in all forms and content. He has asked the PPP team to challenge the laws in the courts as well as all forums of political, parliamentary and social expression. In cricket, India have won the T20 Series against Sri Lanka by beating third and final match at Himachal Pradesh Cricket Association Stadium, Dharamshala. In third match tonight, the hosts beat the visitors by 6 wickets. Sri Lanka made 146 runs for the loss of 5 wickets in 20 stipulated overs. In reply, India scored 148 runs after losing 4 wickets in 16.5 overs. The hosts won the match by 6 wickets. Shreyas Iyer contributed 73 runs in 45 balls, remained unbeaten. Earlier, Sri Lankan skipper Dusan Shankar topped scored 74 off just 38 balls.
Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. Let's take a look at the press reports on China. Bloomberg reports at least 2 of China's largest state-owned banks are restricting financing, mainly US dollar denominated letters of credit for purchases of Russian commodities. Reuters reports China denounces US warship in Taiwan Strait as provocative, which sailed through it on Saturday. The Eurasian Times reports that at a time when Russia has launched a full-scale attack on Ukraine, there have been concerns about Taiwan's fate in the face of Chinese aggression and its vow to reunite the breakaway province. Taiwan Times reports that China has sent a total of 61 military aircraft into Taiwan's identification zone so far this month, including 40 fighter jets, 20 spotter planes and 1 helicopter. Let's take a look at what made the headlines in Nepal. The Kathmandu Post reports that a meeting of the ruling coalition partners has decided to ratify the Millennium Challenge Corporation Nepal Compact with interpretative declaration from the second meeting of the House of Representatives on Sunday. The Himalayan Times reports that Nepali Congress spokesperson Prakash Sharan Mahat has said that Nepal is capable of deciding what is in its interest. And now some news from Afghanistan. AFP reports that a key border crossing between Pakistan and Afghanistan has reopened, officials said on Sunday, days after fighting between security forces left at least 3 dead. Pajvok writes that the Ministry of Finance MOF in Kabul welcomed the Treasury Department's action. Bakhtar News Agency has carried the press release by Taliban Ministry of Foreign Affairs in which they have appreciated the US Treasury Department's action in issuing General License Number 20.
And now a quick look at the headlines once again. Ukrainian and Russian delegations are set to meet on Belarus border for talks. Ukrainian forces says they repelled a Russian assault on country's second city of Kharkiv. UN Security Council to meet tonight over Russia-Ukraine conflict. Indian Embassy in Ukraine advises its citizens to use nearby railway stations to reach western regions. External Affairs Ministry of India calls on ambassadors of Russia and Ukraine separately, conveyed deep concerns on safety and security of Indian citizens in Ukraine. And in cricket, India wins by 6 wickets against Sri Lanka in the third and final T20 International at Dharamshala. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from Iran on their Independence Day. And with that, we end this bulletin. We will be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.